Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm going to talk to you today about lossless scaling with frame generation. This is a quite an interesting program. It's been around since 2018. Was originally designed to uh, be used for scaling images in games, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I want to go over first of all the drawbacks, and second of all the advantages and the potential very big advantages that we have with this program. Now, there's two disadvantages that I have found so far. The first disadvantage is that it costs $7. That's not a huge disadvantage, but everything else I've shared with you so far has been free. This is not, you have to buy it through Steam. That's another disadvantage, by the way. Steam is absolutely terrible. It took me 3 times as long to mess with Steam than it did to actually purchase this and download it from Steam once I got Steam running. Um, the second disadvantage with this is that you need a consistent 60 frames per second performance in the sim to really get a good benefit out of the frame generation portion of the sim of the program rather. Um, so I personally have a 60 hertz monitor. So basically what you do, real short story is you limit your frames in the game to half your monitor refresh rate. So mine is 60 hertz, so I would limit my frames in the game to 30. And then the frame gen portion of this program, LSFG, will give you those other 30 frames back. Okay. The problem is that with only running at 30 frames, the way the program does this is it takes the frame that is generated and predicts what the next frame is going to look like, and then slips it in between the frame that is there right now and the frame that's coming in however many milliseconds. So it needs a pretty quick, it needs a good frame rate to do this without any ghosting and without any artifacts. So if you have a 60 frame, 60 hertz screen like I do, and you're running it at 30 frames per second, it's in my experience it didn't work very well. It's more for 120 hertz screens. And again, to be able to do that, you'd have to be consistently getting 60 frames per second. That's the other thing is you can't have a lot of variation in the target frame rate. So if the target frame rate is 60 FPS for this to work, if you're running consistently at 60 FPS, that's fine. If you have a lot of variation from like say 40 to 60 to it's kind of all over the place, that's not ideal. Um, there are some potential huge advantages to this. So this is the first implementation of this program to have frame gen, and this came out maybe 2 weeks ago, and now it's making the rounds. Everybody's finding out about it. It's designed from the ground up using machine learning. There are a lot of advantages to it. Number one, this works on any graphics card in any program. So it's not just Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's not just NVIDIA versus AMD. It's not just RTX cards. It can work on any card, any game. And the reason it can do that is because it doesn't work on the driver level for your GPU and it doesn't work on the sim level. All it's doing is taking the image on the screen and predicting what the next image is going to be. So the big advantage that I see in this, philosophically, is I have a very strong feeling that NVIDIA and Microsoft are going to, in very short order, do something to get rid of or to prevent us from using the FrameGen mod. Because the FrameGen mod has given so many people um, incredible performance that has now negated their need or desire to upgrade their GPU. And I can clearly understand why NVIDIA would be displeased about that. What I don't understand is why Asobo and Microsoft are displeased about that, and they clearly are, because in the official forums, the moderators have been cleansing very quickly any mention of the frame gen mod. So it is my personal opinion that in relatively short order, the frame gen mod will no longer work. That's my opinion. I'm going to do another video on ways I think we can prevent or be able to use it once that happens. But I think that's going to happen. That's my personal opinion. I have no facts per se to support that. That's my opinion. The great thing about this program is this program will still work no matter what they do. Okay. Um, Now this is also the first version of their frame generator. This is FG 1.0. So they have a Discord server. I reached out to the developer. They were very, very quick to respond and answer the questions that I had. And they emphasized to me that this is the first version of it. This is the first incarnation, and they are very much planning on developing this further. So we can expect better things in the future. Now, Microsoft Flight Simulator is not on the list of games that this works with. It works with this. It works with Flight Simulator. I don't know what the criteria is for getting on that list, but it works with Flight Simulator. So let's take a quick look at the program itself, which would be helpful if I knew where it was. There we go. So lossless scaling with frame generation. So lossless scaling is the original iteration of this program, and what lossless scaling is, there's basically two use cases for it. Number one is if you are getting poor performance at, let's say you have a 1080p monitor, and you're getting poor performance in the sim at 1080p, you downscale your monitor to, or you downscale your resolution to 720 in the sim, right? So you would come here and instead of using your, whichever one is 1080p, I don't even know. You would select a lower resolution. So obviously you get worse graphics, but you get better performance. What lossless scaling will then do is basically backfill those pixels to give you back that 1080p resolution, or what looks like that 1080p resolution. So you would still get the good performance from having downscaled your resolution, and you would get the visual quality back using the scaling. I doubt there's a lot of people using that technique anymore with Flight Simulator. Certainly possible, and it's something you can be aware of that you can use with other games if you're running other games. Now the way you do that, you set the scaling mode to custom, and the scale factor here. So a scale factor of 1 is nothing. It shows you a 1-to-1 image of your whatever your resolution is. So that's no change. That would be pointless in using it. It's also sort of a poor man's DLSS because the 1.3 setting is equivalent to the quality setting for DLSS. 1.5 would be the equivalent of, or no, I'm sorry, 1.3 would be the equivalent of ultra quality. 1.5 quality, 1.7 is balanced, 2.0 is performance. So if you were to set 2.0, it scales the image. You could basically reduce your resolution in half, and it would double it back to what your monitor is capable of. So if you're gonna try, I tried messing around with the scaling a little bit yesterday. I don't need the scaling, so I didn't honestly put a lot of effort into it. Couldn't really figure out a way that it would work on my system. But again, I have a 1440 that runs at a good frames per second, so I don't need it. There's probably better descriptions of how to use it and how to tweak it available to you on YouTube. So anyway, and you would want to use resize before scaling, because otherwise what it's going to do is zoom in the picture. So if you don't resize it before you scale it, if you're using a scale factor of 2, it's going to double the size of the image, and all you're going to see is half the image because it's going to be twice the size of your screen. So it's just going to resize it back down to fit your monitor. The other cool thing about this is that it's got different scaling types that you can try, depending on which, some are going to work better for some people, some are going to work, better for others. So it's got the AMD FSR, it's got NVIDIA image scaling. Um, the one that they recommend really trying first, if you're going to use it for this purpose, is the LS1. I don't understand it. I'm not going to bother trying to explain it to you because it's not going to make any sense. But that's the one they suggest trying first. There's a sharpness slider for all of the different scaling types, which is great. So you can customize the image. But this is unlikely going to be unlikely to be what people are going to want to use this for. People are going to want to use this for the frame gen. So the interesting thing about the frame gen portion of this program is that it only works on borderless full screen games, which are typically older games, right? Because Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 is based on FSX code, it's not an actual full screen. When you go into your game and you select full screen, it's not full screen. What it is borderless. It's a borderless full screen, which means um, it basically expands the image of your sim to look like it's full screen, but there's actually a border around the edge. And anybody who's using multiple monitors can tell you that you can minimize the window and drag it around, which so Microsoft Flight Simulator is actually in many ways a perfect use case for this because it is a borderless full screen game. Um, so you can use it in borderless full screen or windowed, but uh, there's no reason to use windowed unless you use it in your normal flying. So you can use the frame generation version without using the scaling portion of the program. And if you want to do that, just set the scaling mode to auto and set the scaling type to off. And then what you do is this will be off by default. You come here to frame generation and select LSFG. Now you want to make sure that all of the rendering options under here are disabled. All these things should be off because they haven't really been tested. This is version 1.0. Now, in order to use the frame gen, as I said, you have to limit your um, frame rate by half of your monitor's hertz. So for me, I have a 60 hertz monitor. That means limiting it to 30 hertz. Now, what you do is you limit it in the where is Microsoft Flight Simulator? You limit it in the program settings. You don't limit it in the game itself. So what you would do is you would come here, you would set your max frame rate in NVIDIA control panel to half what your monitor refresh rate is. In my particular case, that would be 30. And then you would go in the global settings, and max frame rate in your global settings would be 60 FPS, which is what my monitor hertz rate is. Okay. Again, it doesn't work that, in my experience anyway, it didn't work very well at 60 hertz with the sim being limited at 30 frames per second. So, um, ones that it works well with are 120, 144, 165. So you just do that, the limiting of the frame rate in the program settings at half your monitor refresh rate, limit the frame rates in the I'm sorry, limit the frame rate in the global settings at your monitor refresh rate, and then limit the frame rates in the program settings at half your monitor refresh rate. That's all you have to do. Okay. Um, and so for 120 hertz monitor, you would limit the frame rates in the program settings to 60, etc. Now, ones that have, like, if you have 165 hertz monitor, you're not going to be able to use that because you can't set it to 82 and a half. So what you would have to do is come into your system display, advanced display settings, and select a refresh rate that is divisible by 2. You know, so you would have to reduce it to 120 and then use that. Um, so the other thing you can do, um, or the other thing that's required, you have to have a stable, consistent frame rate that hits the maximum frame rate that you have set in the program settings in NVIDIA Control Panel. So in the program settings, if you've got a max frame rate set at 30 or 60, whatever it is, you have to be consistently hitting that. If you've got it set to 60 and you're fluctuating a lot between 40 and 60, depending on what the scenery is and so forth, it's not going to work very well. You have to really be consistently hitting whatever value you have set in the max frame rate in the program setting. And then what you do once you've done that, the kind of the neat thing is so in order to enable it when you've got the game running, you can turn it on and turn it off as the sim is running. It does, like I said, it doesn't work on the sim level, so you don't have to restart the sim or anything like that. If you've got the sim running and you're in a scenery, wherever you happen to be, if you click the scale button, and it's going to take 5 seconds, and then it will enable whatever you've got set. Okay. And I'm going to click Unscale. Now, what I did was, if you click on settings, you can have a scale hotkey. And so what I did was I set it for Alt plus S. So all you do is just, I think the default was Control Alt S, I believe. And you just click that X and then just enter whatever combo of keys you want to use as your hotkey to turn this program on and off. Basically, enable it on and off in the sim. So I used Alt S, and what I would recommend doing, if I would recommend going into your options. I'm going to discard that. I would recommend going into your options. No, go into control options. Go into your keyboard and then search by input whatever key combo you want to use. Let's say you wanted to use Alt C. So I would search Alt C and see if there's anything that comes up, because you don't want to be turning your carpet on or off using the same hotkey that you're using to enable and disable the frame gen. So that I actually did have something that I had to remove. I forget what it was. Um, but it's no longer there. So um, let's see. And then um, one thing so again, 90 hertz, if you limit it to 45, is kind of the minimum that they recommend using this with. Um, a better combo is 120 hertz monitor, limiting the frame rates to 60 in the sim. Another thing that some people have had success with, because we all know that these things don't always work exactly the same for different people who have the same systems. Who knows why? Another thing that some people have had success with, and I tried, if you're getting sort of, artifacting, any sort of, ghosting on the screen, you can add lossless scaling, add the program itself to NVIDIA Control Panel to the program settings. And the way you do that is you simply click Add, and then it'll bring up a list of your recently used programs, or you can search A to Z, whatever you want. And then you highlight lossless scaling, click Add selected program, and it's going to add the lossless scaling program to your NVIDIA Control Panel. And then what they recommend you doing is forcing VSync on using this. So you would come down here to vertical sync and you would select on apply. So that's one tip to try if you're not getting the visuals that you're looking for, if you're getting some sort of, you know, again, I got some artifacting like around the trees, um, hard edges in the planes, like the, around the windows, that sort of thing. The electronic displays looked fine, like the PFD, the MFD, all looked fine. Um, so um, yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. And again, you can use this with any driver, or excuse me, with any GPU, with any different program, any other game that you happen to play. Um, and that's pretty much it. Um, I mentioned the disadvantage that it doesn't work well with the 60 hertz monitor, but I will say for sure it got way smoother. So what I did when I tested it, um, and I do this a lot now when I test things, is let me get out of dev mode. What I did was in my options, I dumbed down my settings because I generally have, um, you know, all the ultra settings on and, DLSS quality and um, the 34, 38, 40, 21, 60. So that's like the Holy Grail settings, the DLDSR and DLSS. That's what I normally run. And so when I tested this, I completely dumbed it down. And I set it for DX11. I tried DX11 and DX12. Didn't really see any difference in my system because I don't see any difference in my system really. But I switched this back to TAA. And you can also see I don't have. That's another thing actually. Make sure if you're using the FrameGen mod before you do this, uninstall the FrameGen mod. Okay, the other FrameGen mod. Um, I actually saw somebody who's using both, um, which I guess if you've got let's say you've got a 120 hertz screen and you're only able to achieve 30 frames per second, you could conceivably stack these two, the FrameGen mod and this, um, and get and go from 30 frames per second to 120. You can actually do that. So, you know, give that a try if you so wish. Um, but when I switched this to TAA and I was using it in the sim, when I enabled the lossless scaling, um, the frame gen, it got much smoother. TAA is now quite stuttery to me. Um, with this frame gen mod, it was much smoother. The only problem was I got those artifacts and the kind of the weird visuals around trees and so forth. So it works. It definitely smooths out the experience. You just need a faster monitor than I have to be able to use this. So I guess without any further ado, I'm not going to keep talking. There's no reason to. Hopefully, it's very simple to do. I just wanted to walk you guys through the advantages and the disadvantages and the potential. Again, this is the first version of this program, and the developer is going to continue working on this. And quote me right now, I'm telling you, in 6 months or however long it's going to be, when the FrameGen mod is no longer usable, this program could really be the savior. So, just something to keep an eye on, something to be aware of. I hope you guys are doing well. If you have any questions, please go ahead and let me know. And yeah, that's that. Take care, guys.